This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to the latest edition of Doc and Jock. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Joining me, my cousin Adam, the Jock Strozinski. Oh, man, it warms my heart to be broadcasting on such a beautiful Wednesday evening, cuz 69-degree weather, the sun was out, got a chance to take a little walk before the day's work. It was such a beautiful day, especially after a monsoon that we had earlier this week. All thoughts and prayers to Midland, because that scene of the dam breaking was freaking scary. I saw the helicopter view. So tough times for Midland. Our thoughts and prayers are with all the citizens of mid-Michigan. And to be broadcasting with you today is a privilege and an honor, one in which I don't take lightly. I'm very thankful every Wednesday to get a chance to broadcast with you. It's a great time, and doing this podcast really has helped me through the quarantine. A sense of normalcy, no doubt, amidst this tough time. And so talking about the Lions, talking about the Jordan doc, all the things that happen in the world of sports really has made my life a lot better. So how are things with you?
Good, man. You remember a couple years ago when we had we had that all that rain for, I think it was like a 24 or 36 hour period, and the freeways were flooded over and everybody's house were basically backed up with water. You remember all of that?
Yeah.
So like that scene from because I seen that same helicopter view. Shout out to one of my boys who does that, who flies around and videotapes that stuff for the news stations. But it reminded me of all of that. And I think they said at the crest, at the highest, it was 35 feet of flooding. And I think we only had here in the southeast metro Detroit area, I think we only had something like 23 or 24 feet. So you're looking at another 10 or 11 feet for the height of it all. It's absolutely insane what that dam breaking did. So it's absolutely nuts. Thoughts and prayers out to everybody in Midland, Michigan. It is crazy. We do have some really, really nice weather, though. I mean, today's been absolutely beautiful, and the next couple of days look like they're going to be beautiful as well.
Absolutely. So like many people, I enjoyed the last month or so kind of having something to get excited about. You know, you just sit and you're kind of like everybody else. You want to see what the Jordan doc's going to be about. And it was really cool because they moved it up, you know, amid the pandemic. Everyone wanted to see it, so they moved it up. And the first couple weeks were really good. And then, you know, once you started hearing that, you know, Jordan's production team had a lot of involvement, that he had a lot of say in it, you pretty much knew that it wasn't going to go in depth as much as you would like. So right around weeks 5 and 6, I'm like, this isn't as good as I thought it could be, because it was so hyped up as one of the great sports documentaries. So obviously, you and I are Pistons fans, and we love the part about Isaiah Thomas and overcoming the Pistons. So that part of it drew a lot of Detroit fans. But after that, I just feel like the last 5 hours was just one big, long E60 that didn't need to take place. I mean, for me, and I think for yourself too, I don't want to speak for you, but we're sports fans. So I was growing up in that era. So if you're a sports fan, you knew a lot of those stories. You spent an hour on Dennis Rodman. You spent an hour recapping highlights from the series against the Jazz. And you didn't get into the nitty-gritty. You didn't really expose a lot of different things. Yeah, it's nice to see a little bit more in depth about Jordan, what an asshole he was and what a competitor he was, but you didn't go in depth. And you and I think, both take in a lot of documentaries. I watch a lot of them on Netflix, some good ones, some real in-depth exposés about the healthcare field, about sports. So for the Jordan documentary to go that way, I think you and I were both left just feeling a little bit disappointed. And it's just one of those things where when something is hyped up so much, you get excited for it. And now second-guessing it, I just wish they would have just let it play out in June, you know, instead of rushing, doing all the edits and getting it up there, because the last 5 hours just kind of felt disappointing. It was there for hours for the last episodes, 9 and 10. It was on in the background. I was doing other stuff. It just did not capture my attention the second half of the documentary.
So the documentary really lost me when they just kind of whitewashed and glossed over Jordan's dad's death. I remember living through all of that, and I remember everything that came out about it. And you can really tell Jordan had a heavy hand in the production and the editing of this, because at that time, there was a lot of speculation as to why and how his dad died. And then there was a ton of speculation as to why he was why he chose baseball. Because the way the Jordan doc set it all up, it made it sound like, man, I'm just really tired. Basketball has really worn me out. I'm going to go play baseball now. Like, wait, hold up. What? So like, if you're tired, you retire and you just maybe rest and recuperate. No. This dude went from basically playing basketball to then playing baseball. So I to me, it felt like at that time in the documentary, really disjointed for me. It felt like it just kind of glossed over what was really taking place. And I'll be 100% honest with you. I'm one of the ones who believe that. And I know in the documentary they came out and they said, no, that's not exactly how it happened. That's not what it was. I'm one of the ones that believed that Jordan's dad died because of some of the shady dealings Jordan had with gambling, and that led to him being suspended from the league. Like, I grew up during it. Unless there is some way for you to prove within a shadow of a doubt that is not what took place, to the day I die, I will believe that is exactly what took place. And for them to just kind of gloss over all of that, I was like, okay, cool. I'm kind of out on all this. And then you fast forward to episodes 9 and 10. And 9 and 10 felt so lackluster. It felt almost like it was rushed. And it felt like it just kind of like you had material for maybe, like you said, 30 minutes, but we got to stretch this out for 2 hours. And it really kind of let what started off really, really hot, it really let the rest of that documentary down. And I almost refused to call it a documentary because Jordan was so involved in the production of it and controlled all of it that I think you learned a little bit about him. And I think for a younger generation, talking to people who weren't able to see him play or witness him play, it gave them a little bit of insight into who the guy was and who the man was. But it was a total disappointment. And I really felt after each week leaving it, I was like, I kind of wanted a little bit more. I really felt like they could have did a little bit more here. I really feel like they should have elaborated on this or maybe covered this a little bit better. To me, it just kind of felt like a lot of it was half-assed.
Absolutely, and that's what the tough part was, is that a real documentary independent of Jordan's production team would have dived into all that stuff. But when all of ESPN is on it and you don't really go in depth, it's just, I didn't really take the Ken Burns article seriously when he's like, you don't let, Jordan's production team, this is not journalistically credible. I'm like, yeah, some documentaries, they kind of stretch the truth and they, lean towards one side of a story and things like that. So I wasn't expecting, a full-on in-depth investigation of his dad's death, but you would go a little bit into it more. You would maybe say, okay, you introduced one of the characters that you were gambling with that was shady, but you put him on screen for like 40 seconds and you show the $50,000 to $7,000 check, and then you just brush it off and you move on. Where that's the stuff that people wanted to see. And so I was just like yourself. I was disappointed. It, I guess, because of the fact that it was overhyped, it let a lot of people down. But I enjoyed it, being that it was on, and it's not one of those things where I'm going to ever rewatch it because, like you said, we lived through it. But for a documentary, it should have did a lot more. And I do think that story could be told again down the road if someone actually now recognizes the huge ratings it did. Jordan, the topic, could be revisited by some independent journalists and not Jordan's production team. And you don't actually need Michael Jordan now. You can try and dig further and you can look into some of the storylines there. But, for me, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't think that, potentially his dad was involved in the gambling, but I do think that he did have more of a problem than they let on, and that they definitely tried to make Jordan look as good as possible. But when you're in control of the documentary, that's what you're going to do. So it did. Do you
think him going to play baseball was part of a suspension?
I don't think so. Or do you think
it was just him needing to get away from the game?
I believe that. I think that he needed to get away. I think that, he said in the documentary he needed a challenge. He just kind of was fed up with everything. I don't buy into the whole media thing because, you could see there he had a lot of control of the media as is. I just think that there were some reasons that potentially he needed to get away and re-challenge himself and The whole baseball thing, probably they could have did more. I would have liked to have seen some talk of him, the second retirement. What does he do for those 3 years and then comes back in Washington? I would actually liked, you could have cut out 2 hours and put in, just an hour of him struggling as an owner, because he also has a post-basketball life. I know the title is The Last Dance, but you could have talked about the Wizards, him averaging, I think, over 20 points as a 40-year-old, some of the arguments that he had with Kwame Brown. That would have been interesting when, I believe Washington had a very high draft pick, and he got into arguments and called out his teammates regularly in Washington. So you could just do a lot more. You could have a whole other documentary about it. But it begs the question, because I'm curious, because everyone's now looking at, okay, now what's next? Is there a team? I know for me, someone I saw online asked what Lions team. I would love to see a 10-part documentary on the 0-16 Lions, from all the players, the coaches, Marinelli, just to see what it was like, Orlovsky, to go through a season where you don't win. 0-16 would be a great 10-parter. Maybe not 10 parts, that's a lot. Maybe a good 4-parter, 4 or 5 hours. I'd tune into an in-depth story about the Matt Millen era and what it led up to, and then the disastrous season that was, I believe, 2018.
Yeah, I do.
Or 2008. Excuse me.
I think it'd be awesome. Going real quick, going back to the Jordan documentary, I was really surprised that they didn't cover any of his time spent with Washington. Not even a script or a text blurb about what he went on to do. It just kind of like, okay, that's the end. No, he had like a whole other career after that you didn't even touch on, or that his retirement here really set him up for. Like, you didn't even cover any of that, So I thought the way it ended did a real disservice to the whole production of it all. But the 0-16 Detroit Lions team would be fantastic. I think the Jim Schwartz era here in Detroit,
nice,
because there was so much that went on with Jim Schwartz in the Detroit Lions. And it doesn't even have to center on Jim Schwartz. It can center on the Lions as a whole. But what went on with that team when he was at the helm of it? Because me and B are doing the throwback, where we're looking back at the 2011 team, right? So you guys can check that out on Sundays, generally right around 1 o'clock every Sunday, right here on the network. But going back to that time period, I really think Jim Schwartz was a really good coach, right? But that team had so many big personalities. You had Calvin Johnson. You had Matt Stafford, who was coming into his own. You had Ndamukong Suh, who was always front page news. You had so much going on with Martin Mayhew. Martin Mayhew ends up getting the shaft, but looking at the way he drafted, Martin Mayhew did a pretty good job stepping into a really untainable situation. And Jim Schwartz coming in as the head coach, his first gig, his first go-around, I thought he did a fantastic job. So it would be interesting to see just that whole the whole time Schwartz was the head coach. It'd be great to kind of see the rise and then the fall of all of it. I think it'd be a really spectacular, in-depth look. I'd also like to see something surrounding the Detroit Red Wings. Like that 97 team was so damn good. Or even that 2009 season where they made it to the playoff, they made it to the Stanley Cup Finals, and they ended up losing. Even all of that. And then what happened after all that? Because you had so many pieces going so many different directions, and the Red Wings still haven't recovered from that time period. So there's a ton of documentaries out there that I'd love to see.
Absolutely, man. Good stuff. Documentaries. Oh, man. 5 weeks. It went by fast. The 2-hour nature. I mean, if they really wanted to really build up on it, they should have just went 10 weeks. Just an hour a week. We would have only been now 5 episodes in, and I think ESPN is going to now just really look to do more of it, because these stories are worth telling. There's so much that now we've been exposed to because of the pandemic without sports, that they're telling a lot of good stories with the Pistons and back in the day. So there's a lot of good stories, and a lot of podcasts are revisiting the old sports and stuff like that, old debates and old, obviously on the radio you're hearing old games from the Red Wings, Tigers, things like that. But man, interesting the way that Jordan presented himself. But at least we got 4 or 5 new memes from Michael Jordan. We got a lot of great stories about how he hoed out Scotty Burrell. So I liked it. I liked the trash talking. That was interesting in of itself. And we got to have a little bit of wrestling, too, with Dennis Rodman leaving the team to go to WCW Nitro. So that was all good, too.
I've never heard a guy use the word hoe as much as Michael Jordan when he was addressing Scott Burrell.
That was the best. Make the free throw, hoe.
You little hoe. Come on, hoe. Like, what? Like, jeez. I like never in a million years. Like, I don't even, dude. So like, you and I both grew up during the 90s. Like, and that was like a big thing in the 90s was to call somebody a hoe. But like, I don't think either one of us used that word that much. That was his go-to word. It's crazy. You know what, though? I think ESPN does a really good job. I love ESPN E60. I think E60 is great. I will stop and I will watch it. Did you see the E60 on Alex Smith and his leg and his rehabilitation?
No. Oh, I saw the foot, dude.
Okay,
Oh.
you need to go back. You need to go back and you need to watch that E60. It is great. E60 is fantastic. I think what they could do is get that production team together and do more than what you do with the 30 for 30s. Do more of these mini series, these 10-part mini series. I think you have a thing here if you're ESPN because the production quality is so damn good, and they've got guys like Jeremy Schaap is excellent at storytelling. I'm in the middle of rewatching the Drew Bledsoe E60, and it's fantastic. Jeremy Schaap is excellent at his job. You've got guys who are really, really good at ESPN, and you've got the production team that is top notch. You could do a ton of these and really build out your programming and fill everything out. And this could be, and you know, hats off to Bill Simmons, because Bill Simmons was the reason for the 30 for 30. It was his brainchild. So hats off to him. ESPN has the manpower and has the ability and the production crew to be able to expand that 30 for 30 and do these 10-part miniseries and really give us good, in-depth. And I want them to be journalistic. I want you to tell both sides of the story. I want you to do some investigation. And I want to be involved in it. I want you to get me involved with it.
Yep.
And I think they could do that.
Absolutely. Now, before we transition and talk about the Detroit Lions and some contributions that the rookies are going to make, we have to give love to Joe Rogan because he is a pioneer that has taken the podcast game now to the next level. I know you heard about it. I know you've had to have heard the whispers. Dude, Joe Rogan took his podcast exclusive to Spotify in what's being reported by the Washington Post as a $100 million deal. In essence, Joe Rogan, if you don't know, has a great conversational podcast. In essence, the guest sits there for 2-3 hours, and they talk about everything from conspiracy theories to sports to medicine to healthy living to eating meat to hunting. The man is just a genius, and he can hold your interest in a conversation for 3 and 3.5 hours. You know, obviously, some of his YouTube videos have eclipsed 15 million views. So, obviously, he caught someone's attention, and he was averaging, I think I read, 2 billion downloads a year. So he took that, and I think it's going to be a trend where, you know, how we do the podcast and then we put it everywhere. And he, you know, leveraged his podcast to the point where a company said, no, don't do this whole spread your wild seed everywhere. We'll give you a boatload of money. You put your product right here, and this is where you come. And that's what Spotify's doing, is they're buying up podcasts to get into the game. Why is that? Because the podcast game is a great game. Obviously, one in which Adam and I partake since 2013. We definitely understand the value of it. We love the complementary nature with radio. So kudos to Joe Rogan, man. A guy that whenever someone does something that big for podcasting, it just helps everybody. If you do good work, you can take a podcast from your basement and reach great success. You can get your name out there. You can have great conversation. You can say and control whatever you want. And I'm interested to see how the world now goes, because guess what, cuz? We got a little bit of battle. Spotify's taking on, it's tackling Apple, and they've cut Apple's market share of the podcast from 80% Apple had just 2 years ago to, like, I think I read 55% to 60% now. They've taken 20% of their podcast audience because of their high-profile podcast, and now they got the biggest, the number 2, or sometimes number 1 as well, podcaster in the world. Joe Rogan is going to be exclusively broadcasting starting in September over there at Spotify. So kudos to him, man. That's big money, and that's big for podcasting.
That's crazy, man. I haven't heard that. You just broke news for me. So that's nuts. And Joe Rogan does have a fantastic podcast. It's great.
It's good stuff. Huh?
He's an interesting guy. To be able to sit down with somebody and just talk about everything underneath the sun for hours on end it's fantastic. He does a really, really good job. He's a really interesting cat for sure.
No doubt about it. All right, cuz before we get out of here, I think you and I are getting excited about the Detroit Lions and what potentially they can accomplish, especially with the new blood. Obviously the Lions are going to have really a veteran-laden team because of the fact of COVID-19. There's going to be a different way that the roster is put together, less time in OTAs, just a whole different type of offseason. So it's important that the young cats get in and handle these virtual meetings and understand what's going on. And so obviously it's time now to start exploring. And I think that you and I are both very curious about what really can Ohio State alum Jeff Okudah and former Georgia Bulldog, and what former Georgia Bulldog DeAndre Swift can accomplish their rookie seasons. So I want to ask, because obviously, Swift probably is going to get more time on the field, but I do think that Jeff Okudah can contribute right away, especially with his familiarity of the defense, the ability that he's going to have to get out there right away and produce. So I'm just curious, who do you think is going to contribute more their rookie season? Is it going to be DeAndre Swift? Because he's going to be, the challenging aspect with him is he's going to be part of a running back trio, and Bob Quinn has let his feelings be known that he believes in a running back by committee approach. He just doesn't want to give DeAndre Swift 30 carries. Doesn't want to give Kerryon Johnson 30 carries. He wants to use Bo Scarborough, Ty Johnson. Obviously, Kerryon Johnson has to stay healthy, and then potentially Huntley if he makes the team, and then the others that are competing, including a fullback. So the committee approach there is very interesting. So it may limit what obviously DeAndre Swift can do his rookie year. Obviously, I think he's going to be used in the backfield quite a bit. But Okudah, in my mind, if you ask me, I think he'll make a lot of contributions. I know people poo-poo it, that it's really hard for a cornerback, but I do believe that if you're drafted third, they see something. And if you watch film of him, his performance last year was unbelievable. Did not get beat too often, very rarely penalized, solid fundamentals, and was part of a really good Ohio State team. So I like what Okudah brings. So in my mind, I think Okudah, maybe he starts off a little slower, but by the end of the year, I think he'll put up some solid defensive numbers and at least help that defense slow down the opponent's offense. I think Okudah will make more of an impact than DeAndre Swift.
I mean, you tell me this. Did I miss something? Is Jeff Okudah not your starting cornerback? Is he not going to be playing opposite of Stephon Trufant? I mean, did I miss something? I mean, look, in my estimation, the guy's going to play roughly 95% of the snaps on defense, or at least he better. He was your third overall pick in this year's draft. You took him for a reason. That being said, we both know cornerbacks tend to struggle when they make that jump from college to the pros. Not every cornerback steps in and makes that immediate impact and shows what they can do. But if I remember, Darius Slay was drafted and he was starting. So I'm assuming Okudah's going to start, and I'm assuming Okudah's going to play pretty well. I mean, you've invested this highly in him. If you're a good organization, you should be able to turn out a stud player with your third overall draft pick who makes an immediate impact. If not, you're doing things wrong. So Okudah better show his wares out there. But I do think it's going to be DeAndre Swift who's going to be probably the better rookie his first season out of the two. I just think he's going to play a little bit more of a impactful role, especially on the scoreboard. I believe by the time it's all said and done, Swift will be your starting running back. He will be your number one. Kerryon Johnson has not, ever in his career, been able to stay healthy. Kerryon Johnson is your only competition. I think Swift is a little bit better at catching the ball out of the backfield. I don't think Swift has the immediate burst that Kerryon has, but I think Swift is quick enough to be able to make guys miss and get into that second level. My big issue with him, and watching some of his highlights and some of the game footage on Swift, is it's what happens when he gets into that next level, right? So he gets by the lines and he gets into the linebacking core, and usually he's shifty enough to make a guy miss there, but he usually gets brought down from behind by a cornerback or by a safety. So guys who are a little bit faster tend to catch up on him. He doesn't have that home run power, that home run burst, and that's kind of my big issue with him at running back. All that being said, I think he's going to be your primary running back probably by week 6. I mean, their bye week is week 5. So week 6, he comes out. He's your number one guy. Okudah, I think, is going to struggle a little bit early. That's just what cornerbacks do. When it's all said and done, he'll solidify that position. And if he's as good as everybody says he is, and if he's worthy of the 3rd overall pick, he better be your best cornerback on this damn team by the time the season's done. But for me, it's going to be DeAndre Swift. I think he'll be the brightest of these rookies. You know what else? Yeah. You could also see a guy like Okudah. Julian Okudah could really surprise this year, and he could be a formidable piece on that defensive line.
Yeah, see, I think maybe Okudah definitely could sneak up there and be the unsung hero, the rookie of the year for the Lions. But don't you just get the sneaking suspicion that the fans and many maybe in the media might start clamoring for Swift because of what he can do? A guy that can definitely do a lot out of the backfield. He can be explosive. I think that this whole running back by committee approach might be something that causes a controversy early on. You got some fans already starting to tweet and chirp at Kerryon Johnson saying, hey, stop spending time on the beach and get to working out. To which Kerryon Johnson replied, yo, I don't have to be posting all my workouts. Let me enjoy the beach. And check out that tweet. Definitely has a very good love life. I think he's a very happy man at the moment. So yeah, don't hate on Kerryon Johnson, but I definitely fan the flame a little bit because I think that DeAndre Swift is a little bit more explosive and could be used a little bit more. So I just hope that they don't, because it's a very important year, I just hope that they don't limit his usage and put him on like a pitch clock or whatever we call it, where a snap count where he can only play so many downs and things like that. Let him go. If he's out there, if he's the best running back, let him go. Let him be out there and let him be somebody that can be productive. Running back by committee, I understand because, running backs are so heavily used and they take a lot of hits. So having many of them will be great. And I like the trio. Scarborough, Swift, and Kerryon Johnson should be very, very productive together. I just don't know that Swift is going to be able to be on the field as much as potentially Okudah or even Julian Okudah. And look for potentially Logan Stenberg to get up there and compete and help out that running game. A guy that's nasty probably is going to be a very highly competitive and motivated individual. So I just think that this rookie class, if given and put in the right spot, can actually do some things this year. Before we get out of here, I'm definitely curious. I don't know if you're seeing it. No Lions on the top CBS 100 players. Lions also snubbed from the Rising Stars. ESPN's Bill Barnwell kind of came out and said that only 3 teams had a worse offseason. So while many people did like what the Lions did, you concerned at all about some of the critiques that you're starting to hear now as we inch closer to June? Now some of the deeper analytics are coming out, or deeper insights are being talked about, and not a lot of love nationally for the Lions outside of for Matthew Stafford.
It doesn't really surprise me. I mean, we hammered this team all offseason on what they've done. They're still sitting on a giant chunk of money that they've not invested in any other players. They didn't really address their big weak point, which was that defensive line. So it doesn't really surprise me there. Matt Stafford should probably be the major talking point here. I really feel like he needs to come out this year, and he needs to have a really, really good year. Otherwise, you might see him get traded away, and they might do something in the draft next year. I was looking for them to draft his replacement this year, but that's just me.
Definitely. I think we'll be here to fan the flames of a controversy. No doubt about it. I think it'll be great. I think that probably will be one storyline to see how it progresses in terms of who's on the field when, just that one play that obviously, who gets the ball on 3rd and 1, who gets the ball in critical moments. It'll be something talked about. I think maybe we started a nice little debate there in terms of Swift versus Kerryon Johnson.
Listen, in your estimation, what does DeAndre Swift do better than Kerryon Johnson? What is the one thing that he is heads and tails better than Kerryon Johnson in?
Oh, such a good question. I think out of the backfield, he'll be explosive. I think somebody that has the opportunity to get out there right away and be able to get on the field and play for the Lions and make plays. I think he might be a touchdown machine. I think somebody that can get to the end zone and handle their business.
I think he is the better pass catching back out of the two of them. I also think DeAndre Swift is a little bit better between the tackles. Again, the one downside for me with DeAndre Swift is he doesn't have that home run ability. He's a quick and he's an elusive back, but he doesn't have that fast downhill speed. Once he gets going, I always see guys catch him from behind or drag him down just as he's trying to break away. He never really gets it into that next gear. I really feel like he's got maybe 1 or 2 gears. He can't throttle it up and really take off and run away from guys. That's my big issue with him.
Great podcast recording. Always enjoy the time with Adam. Follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSCROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Thanks, everybody. Tune in next week to another episode of Doc and Jock.